Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. Today, I have the guy behind Punk Rock MBA and many brand integrations and a lot of brands that have blown up on social. He himself is a content creator. Finn McKenty, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to hear about your journey into this world because you worked for major brands. You've done design, marketing for Abercrombie & Fitch, for Swiffer, Febreze, products we're all familiar with. But you also have this whole other side to you with music production and like online programming. So let's just start. Like, how did you get into this? Obviously, you're in Seattle as well. So I'm sure music has been a huge part of your life.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you my entire life story, not really. But so I started YouTube in 2017 for a pretty simple reason that probably a lot of people can identify with, which is I kind of felt invisible. So you described some of the stuff that I'd done in my career. So I've done like design and marketing for 20 some years now, including a lot of the brands you mentioned, like kind of on the agency side. Like the first stuff I worked on was like Nike, Red Bull, and Nintendo, which I was totally unqualified for, and I did not very good work for that, to be honest with you. But, it got my foot in the door, and then I sort of parlayed that into the other stuff that you talked about. And, on the agency side is where I did the stuff for like Febreze and Swiffer and Balance and all that. Then I was at Abercrombie. And I worked for a startup called Creative Live that I'm pretty sure we were the first to do like streaming video education for creative people. And I started there in 2013. I was there right after we raised our Series A. And then we got our Series B, and I was there until 2017. So I'd done a lot of stuff that I think was pretty cool, and I feel like I was good at my job. But I felt like the world just didn't really care. It's like probably a lot of people right now with the job market being what it is, you're like, look at my resume. I'm good at what I do, but nobody is paying attention to me, and I can't get anyone to give me the time of day,
Yep.
That was the situation I was in, and it was really, frustrating and scary. And I felt like even though I had done all this stuff, I still sort of felt like the world was like a closed door to me, because I've never had any success really getting a job through any sort of traditional path. It's always been because I knew someone who knew someone and rah, which is probably true for a lot of people. But I never felt like I fit in.
Yeah.
And I never felt like I was really a leading candidate for anything. And so I said, well, I need people to know who I am. I need people to know my name and face. Like I need to be more visible. And so I started a YouTube channel for that reason. And I didn't talk about music because it's necessarily something that I'm all that passionate about. It's just because I knew obviously I know a lot about it because I've been around it my entire life, but not really like my passion, but it's a thing that I knew I could get an audience for on YouTube. And so I did that. And I now have, between my two channels, I have about 730,000 subscribers, and I've gotten like 130 million views. So now there are like literally tens of millions of people who know my name and face. So it kind of solved the problem, which I did not expect at all. Like I thought, if I get 2,000 or 3,000 subscribers, that would be pretty cool. And ended up being way bigger than I thought it would. But that's the reason why I did it is, to solve that problem that I think probably a lot of people can identify with.
Yeah. Well, and I'm seeing that a lot now we were talking before we got on. I teach grad school at USC. We're going to have you come on that podcast and speak to our students as well. But the job market, it's so hard to find the right job. There are so many industries that are in flux, whether it's because, I'm in LA, so the entertainment industry with strikes with COVID. Now we have AI that everybody's trying to figure out their way around and what jobs is it going to take, what jobs is it going to create. And so that personal brand and that thought leadership piece is really what you're talking about. And this is something that I love talking about. And
Good, because I do too.
Yay. And I love the way that you approach this in terms of what can I do that's a good hook that will help get me out there so that people know who I am. Because you're right, a lot of the design is behind the scenes. It's like you get to do all the work, but you don't get the accolades. You don't get the credit for it.
Yep. And even if you have those names on your resume as a client, it's like, okay, that's nice. It's an interesting thing with the agency world in particular is you can work on those things as a designer at an agency, but unless you have the company's name on your resume, you basically don't get any credit for it. Right. So like I didn't work at Procter & Gamble. I worked on a lot of their products. if I had Procter & Gamble on my resume, that would probably open a lot of doors. But working on it as a designer really didn't open any doors, which I thought it would because those are very impressive brands. So the lesson here, which I think is really unfortunate, I wish the world worked differently, but generally speaking, opportunities tend to go to the people who are most visible, who are not necessarily the people who are, quote unquote, most qualified, right? I mean, we've all seen tons and tons of people that are not that great at their job that get promoted or, get hired or whatever. And all these, that get a lot of opportunities that you're kind of like, man, he's not that great at his job. I deserve that. But, for whatever reason, they're better at making themselves visible internally or externally, better at playing those political games and stuff. And, I just sort of found myself on the wrong side of that one too many times.
Yeah. On the one hand, you had great opportunities. On the other hand, you were trying to figure out how to parlay them. And so you had to solve it for yourself.
Yeah.
I am also a person, I've had a very non-traditional career. Everything has been very organic, from promoting DJs and clubs and being in the music scene in Kansas City and then Chicago and then LA and then launching magazines. And it's all been the same kind of thing where it's had the effect where I'm not very hireable for a traditional agency or traditional company.
Even though I'm sure you would be awesome at doing the work, but unfortunately, it's two completely different things. Like being good at getting the job and being good at doing the job are two entirely different things.
Yeah.
Which I didn't understand until way later in my life.
Yeah. Well, and also working for somebody under their constructs, right? Versus figuring out what you can do on your own. And it sounds like, now you have your own business and you do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And you have helped people figure out how to market and brand themselves on platforms like YouTube. Mm-hmm. So you started in 2017 with your channel. How quickly did it grow? And what did you see? Like, when did you have that aha light bulb moment that you're like, oh, wait, this is really working. And this is much bigger than I thought it was going to be.
I think it took about 9 months for it to work, which it feels like an eternity in the moment, but it's not really that long.
Not that long.
Yeah. And by working, I mean, the first few videos I put out, maybe the first 50 videos I put out or something, were getting like, 120 views or something like that, which, to me is not a lot. And then I put one out, maybe whatever it was, like in the 9-month mark, that got shouted out by a friend of mine who is a pretty successful YouTuber. And that one got like 1,200 views or something. And I was like, okay, this is starting to get somewhere. But it was because I got a shout out from a friend of mine. So I don't know if that really counts. And then maybe a month or two after that, I put one out that got like 10,000 views in a day, purely organically. And then I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I've been working toward. And suddenly in that moment, to be honest, it was pretty demoralizing in that 9 months where I was putting stuff out that, it's that feeling of shouting into the void is awful. It's actually like, I think it's worse to just be ignored. Like, getting a negative reaction is bad, but getting ignored, I think, feels even worse. Well, it was kind of demoralizing, but as soon as I got that first video that got 10,000 views organically, I was like, okay, that was worth it.
Yeah. Well, and that was going to be my next question was this all organic? Did you do any paid? And you just answered that. What was it?
Paid doesn't work. I wish it did. I wish you could throw money at YouTube. You can't. It's got to be organic.
Really?
Yep. It's got to be organic.
Okay. Interesting. What was it that was different about that video that you think made that something click?
Topic, which is 80% of the game in YouTube. The choice of topic, meaning that some things just have an inherently larger, more engaged audience than others. For example, I'm looking at your house here and I see you've got some paintings on the wall. So if you were to talk about artists, there's, painters, there's the big name painters we can all think of. Mm-hmm. Those are going to get more views than an equally good video about a painter that nobody knows about, simply because people want to click on videos that they know about. So I made a video about a band called Bring Me the Horizon that's like very popular. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that that's the one that popped off, but that was it. So choice of topic is 80% of the game, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you flagged my art, because this isn't usually where I do podcasts, but I love the space and I'm really into the art. And I can tell, I'm looking around, I can tell a story about each artist, but you're right, most of them are not well known.
Right.
And so they mean something to me, but they're not going to mean something to the general audience.
Yep. So right or wrong, that's just the game you got to play. If you want to get views, you need to talk about things that are broadly, familiar. So I would think about it, a rough framework for it is you could think about the total audience for a video is expressed by the number of people who know about the thing multiplied by the amount that they care about the thing. Right? So in the case of, let's say, the Mona Lisa, everybody knows what that is.
Right.
Do people care about it? I don't know, maybe, kind of, sort of, but everyone knows what it is. So I feel like that, you could imagine that being recommended on your homepage and has 3 million views. And it's like, what was the Mona Lisa looking at? And you'd be like, good question. I don't know. On the other hand, you could make a brilliant video about an artist that may not be that well known, but the people who do know about that person care a lot. And so that could work. Mm-hmm. But if it's a situation in which, it's a fairly unknown thing and the engagement around that topic is low, then that video is probably going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so after that first video that went viral, did you see that people start going back to your other videos, or did you start peeking? Okay. So what was the next step in your journey?
I just made more videos like the one that blew up, and that was off to the races. And I've been doing it, whatever, that was 6 years ago or something. I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. So large bands that were well known.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you do any keyword research or, anything like that when you were looking at YouTube?
You can do that stuff. You can. At the end of the day, you have to know the audience at a sort of really intimate level. Like all of this stuff is applied psychology at scale. Like you have to know what topics people care about. Like I don't need Google to tell me that people care about Bring Me the Horizon. Like I know that, right?
Right.
And I think if you don't know that, then you're probably going to struggle because we're playing the attention game here. Mm-hmm. And it is all about creating an emotional reaction in the audience. And your job is to understand, what they care about and why. And I don't think there's any software tool that can tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah. AI can do some brand sentiment analysis, but it's not going to distill the actual storytelling behind it.
Yeah.
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 So how have you now parlayed this into a business?
Well, I mean, I made a lot of money from it. I make probably 4 times more than I did at my last 9-to-5 job, and I made 6 figures there. So, I mean, I made a lot of money from it.
Yeah. As a creator.
Yeah. Yeah. From AdSense, from brand deals, from merch, Patreon, all that stuff combined.
Nice. And then at this point, you are also helping people understand how to create their brands, how to grab attention. So are there specific industries that you prefer to work with? Is it kind of all over the board?
Yeah, I mean, I'll work with anybody. The most important thing to me, so I help people grow their personal brand on LinkedIn or YouTube.
Okay.
And it's not so important to me what industry they work in, although, there's some where I have some knowledge. For example, one of the people I work with now does user research, which is something I know a lot about because I did it, back in the agency days doing the product development stuff. So I know a lot about that. It makes it easy to work with him just because I know a lot about it. But the most important part really is about them and their willingness to put in the work. And I would say humility is sort of the number one characteristic that it takes to be successful because as we've talked about, you really have to put yourself in an audience first point of view all the time. Mm-hmm. Right? And you always have to just ruthlessly ask yourself, what's in it for them? Why would they care about this? We see people on LinkedIn that all they do is just post about, hey, we just finished this project and nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's good for you, but
it's, I mean, it's the same thing when people go, I was just having this conversation yesterday, actually. You go to a website and somebody has all of the things that they do.
Yeah.
They're not telling you why it's important.
Right. Exactly. So the first thing I work with people on is to focus on how they want to present themselves, to focus on one thing. You got to be one thing to the world, which is tough because especially entrepreneurs, which is who I work with, entrepreneurs are multifaceted people. You may legitimately be good at 3 or 4 things. You may legitimately, I was a good graphic designer with a solid track record. I am a very credible marketer. I'm a solid YouTuber. But you can't present yourself as designer / marketer / YouTuber because nobody knows what that is. People are cognitive misers, meaning that they're not going to invest their own brain cycles into parsing you and trying to understand who you are. They're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
So the first thing we got to do is decide what is the one thing that we want to focus on presenting you. How do we present you to the world in one specific way, and come up with the LinkedIn headline, I think, is sort of the most important piece of this. So the way that I like to structure that is to say what you do and who you do it for, followed by some demonstrated proof of your expertise. So, for example, you could say, like, if you were an SEO consultant or something like that, you could say, SEO for horizontal B2B SaaS companies / 500 plus websites were hauled since 2014 or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll notice that that's extremely specific.
Yes.
Like SEO consultant for horizontal B2B SaaS companies. I have a friend whose tagline is literally homepage optimization for early stage horizontal B2B SaaS companies.
Wow.
And his company does a lot of revenue because it is so specific that if you are one of those people, you're instantly going to laser focus on that. And if you're not one of those people, cool, then, you were never going to work with them anyway. So that's the first thing to do. And then everything we do after that is downstream of that. So the banner, photo, the about section, the featured links, all your content, everything you do needs to be laser focused on reinforcing the stuff that we talked about in that headline.
Mm-hmm. That's just really hit the nail on the head, because when I work with entrepreneurs for PR, and I'm one of those I do digital, I do brand, I do PR, comms, podcasting, I'm a professor. So it's that thing where, like, what do I put as my sweet spot?
Right.
But when I work with other entrepreneurs, I find the same thing. I'm like, we really have to hone in on just one facet of you.
Yep.
And then use that as a jumping off point for these other things, perhaps. Right. You have to dial in on like what's your strongest suit.
Yep. What's the strongest asset you have to lead with? For example, for me, it's YouTube, even though, to me, I would say that's among the least interesting things about me, but it doesn't matter what I think.
Yeah.
It matters that I can tell the world, look, I have 130 million views on YouTube, and people will instantly go, oh, okay, that sounds interesting.
Right. Yep.
That opens the door for me to talk about, whatever else it is that I want to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. How do you grab attention these days and still make it seem natural to who you are? Because I feel like there's also that push-pull of, like, you see a lot of the big marketers who talk about how do you go viral on social media, and it is the attention thing, but it's also stuff that might not be congruent with you, your brand, and what you're trying to represent.
There's a way for, so first of all, showing up as your authentic self is always going to be the right way. It is the only way. It's the only choice you have, because nothing else will work. Like, it is the only choice that you have. And in particular on LinkedIn, it's actually very effective because of exactly what you said. So many people are either scared to be their authentic selves because they think that they're either going to be judged for it or that it's going to limit their opportunities or something like that, which I understand why people feel that way, but it's definitely not true. Because think about it this way. When you're on LinkedIn, what do you want to see? Do you want to see someone being, real and expressing themselves the same way that they might be if you went out let's say you went out for a happy hour drink with them after work? You want them to show up on LinkedIn like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't want them to be there buttoned up, hello, LinkedIn friends, I'm proud to announce blah, blah, blah. You're like, who is this person? That's not what you sound like. So it's weird that all of us, like, we tell ourselves that somehow it's okay for other people to be authentic, but it's not okay for me to be authentic. But it is okay for you to be authentic. And that's also going to actually make people want to work with you more, because they're going to be so excited to see that, like, oh my God, thank you. I'm so glad there's someone else here that's not so uptight. So that's number one. And then number two, the question is, so you have permission to be authentic, and you actually have the obligation to be authentic. Number two, the question is just like, how do you do that? Which, just sort of depends on who you are. But I think the more you show up as your authentic self, the more you're going to realize that is you're going to be rewarded for that. And it really just comes down to the specific details of how you execute that, which is sort of the type of thing that I work with people on.
Nice.
But you just got to say what you think, because the opinions that you think are going to be deeply unpopular probably actually aren't. Right? It's probably going to be a lot of people saying, yes, I've been saying this for years. Thank you. Someone finally, had the nerve to say this, most likely, and if anybody is any of the people who, may react super negatively to that or may judge you for it, well, do you really want to work with them?
Yeah, they're not your people. They're not your people. And that's one of the things that drives me crazy about LinkedIn is I think people realize now it's a great tool. It's a great platform. We need to be on it. We need to be networking. We need to be showing up. But also there's still people, it drives me crazy, who say they want to connect, and I'm a connector, but then they just try to sell me something right away.
Yep. Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's part of the deal. Just ignore them.
Yeah. I just wish I could teach them all to not do that. You'll be more effective. But obviously, they're making some headway somewhere. So, and you also work in the online education space.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've been doing that for 10 years, first at Creative Live. And then in 2017, when I left Creative Live and started YouTube, I also became a partner in a company called URM Academy. We teach music. It's an online education company for music producers.
Oh, nice.
So if you want to learn how to record and mix music, we teach you how to do that. And we have like 7,000 members or something like that from all over the world. And so I do all the product design and product management for us.
Awesome. How have you seen things shift in both of those worlds, YouTube, LinkedIn, online education since 2017, especially now, like, of course, Gen AI is the big topic. Everybody's figuring out how it's disrupting things.
Yes. AI is totally irrelevant to me. I don't think about it at all. I don't think, unfortunately, I'm very old. So I've seen a lot of these big shifts happen many times. Like I remember, when I first started doing design in the 90s, this is when it first started kind of becoming viable to do design on a computer, and all the previous generation of people were so upset for all the same reasons they're upset about AI. They're saying, now, everybody can do it. All the work is going to be terrible and people don't know what they're doing and it's going to destroy all the jobs, rah, rah, rah. Well, are there more people now getting paid to do design than there were in the 90s? Yes, probably 100 times more. Mm-hmm. Same thing happened with digital cameras. Like around the mid 2000s, they became viable replacements for film cameras. And they said the same thing. It's going to flood the industry with people that don't know what they're doing, blah, 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 blah. It's going to destroy it. Well, again, are there more or less people getting paid to do photography now versus 20 years ago?
No.
For sure more.
Yeah.
There's way more, right? You just see the same thing. It's going to be the same thing with AI. Yes, there's going to be a negative impact on some people, the people probably like at the lower end of the quality spectrum. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, that's just the nature of technology. But the people who are going to win are the ones who are both creative, hardworking, and also understand how to use AI. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a non-issue. It's going to be fine.
It's another tool in your toolbox. It's not the be-all, end-all.
That's it. Yeah. It's not as amazing or as awful as anybody thinks.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my opinion.
I love that perspective. There's so many people who are still scared of it. Even students of mine who are getting masters in digital media. And like, you have to use it. It's just part of our lives. Just understand it. Yep. Don't be afraid of it because it's going to help serve you better in whatever roles you have.
Yep.
You don't have to use it, but you have to at least understand how to use it.
For example, I've been podcasting probably since 2012, I think, or something like that. And I used to get transcripts for the podcasts, and I had to have a human do them.
Yep.
And so I would use like rev.com, who outsourced it, I assume, to like India, the Philippines, or something like that. And it was like $1 a minute, and it would take a day or two to get it, which is not a huge deal. But, when you're on a shoestring budget and you're doing, it's like a couple $100 a month, you're like, kind of stings. Well, now Premiere will do those transcripts for me for free in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks to AI. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do too. It's a massive time saver. Well, let's talk about your podcast.
Yeah. Well, I actually just stopped doing it.
Okay. Okay. So.
Yeah. I stopped doing it basically because the juice wasn't worth a squeeze for me. But I did 150 of them or something like that, and they got millions of views for it. But it ran its course. And I think for most people, if anyone's listening to this, for most people, if you're thinking about doing a podcast as your personal branding vehicle, I would urge not to do that for most people. There are some exceptions, but for most people, number one, everybody has a podcast. There's so many of them. And unless you are legitimately already famous for something, and I mean famous, not like me, I mean like, whatever, Hollywood level famous, or you are willing to have like nuclear hot takes, then it's probably going to be very difficult to get people to pay attention to your podcast. And so I think you would probably have more success with less work just making content yourself from your own like LinkedIn profile, right?
This is so funny because I have the opposite perspective.
Okay.
Well, before I had the podcast, I podcasted for clients and they didn't have budgets. And so I was like, I can't put all this time in. I'm not making any money. I'm doing all the work. So I started my own podcast about 4 years ago. And so I'm still on the very new spectrum of podcasting. But I didn't take it very seriously at first. And then all of a sudden I realized it had grown and found a following. And now it's monetized and it's become a big part of my business.
Yeah.
Now
it certainly works. Like I said, most people.
Yeah, but I'm speaking at podcast conferences and try to create curriculums for university and stuff like that out of it because it's something I love, but it's also, I've seen it as a networking tool. I'm meeting people I never would have met. And I feel like a lot of the podcasts, I think it's only like 14% of podcasts in the ether are active at this point in time. So
that sounds right.
I think it's really easy to burn out quickly. I agree with you that if you aren't ready, if you're not going to take it seriously and understand how to use it as a full spectrum marketing tool. So understanding how to use the video content appropriately, share it across your, socials, your website, your blog, newsletter, and really maximize the effectiveness. Yeah, it is work, but if you use it in that way, then you could repurpose it for everything. Now, if you're not, then you're right. It's going to be hard to find an audience and get traction.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm painting with broad strokes. The pattern that I see a lot, I probably have this conversation with people 5 times a week, is somebody has an interview show with sort of interesting people from their industry. And if I listen to those conversations, they're very good. And I can see why they believe this to be valuable content. But they're putting it out everywhere and they're getting, 50 views on YouTube and they're putting it on LinkedIn and kind of not really getting that much out of it. So they're doing all the things you said, but the juice just kind of isn't worth the squeeze for them. And I think if they just, rather than bringing on a guest to talk about why generative AI is not that scary, you could just make a post on LinkedIn that says, hey guys, generative AI is not that scary.
Right.
And probably get more reach for that with 30 minutes of work instead of putting in 8 hours of work into a podcast to get the same results.
Yeah.
But, again, I'm painting with broad strokes.
Yeah. And I will say this is where AI and overseas teams really helps cut down the time.
That is very true too.
Yes. Yeah. And so when people because I think there are topics like podcasting, AI, branding, things that I teach, that I do, but the markets are really saturated with, like you said, these big name people who've shouted out, they've carved the niche. Is there still room for other people to come in and have voices and maybe not be the big players, but still gain traction?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's all relative, right? Like the idea that if you're not number one, then you're nothing is a story that a lot of us tell ourselves. Like, I mean, I feel that way a lot of times. It's not true. I mean, by YouTube standards, I'm a nobody. I mean, I have 750,000 subscribers, which is fine, but there's thousands of channels that have more, and I could beat myself up by saying, oh, look at me, I only have 750,000 subscribers. Look at all these other channels that have more. But in reality, I mean, that's a very large audience. That's a lot of people, right? So to your point, there's always room for more, especially if you have a differentiated point of view. And who cares if there's someone that has millions of, followers in your space? Do you need millions of viewers? Probably not.
Yeah.
It depends on your goals and your business model, but for most people, you could I don't want to say easily, but there's a very straightforward path to making 6 figures a year with a relatively modest following of like in the thousands. I think there's generally a path there. And I think anybody can get a following in the thousands if they're willing to do it. Getting a following of millions, okay, that's always possible, but tough. But yeah, you can, get a following of a few thousand people and turn that into a 6-figure living for sure.
Nice. So there's hope for all of us. Another question I wanted to ask was about video, short form versus long form, because we've seen all of the social media platforms now embrace video. We've seen that video SEO is hot, right? And even YouTube has YouTube Shorts. What is your perspective on both the ratio, anything else that you can share with us?
I think short form content is trash for the type of audience that's probably listening to this. And I will give you a few reasons for that.
Great.
Number one, it doesn't make any money. So, for example, I have a couple shorts with like 400,000 views and I literally made like $23 from them.
Wow.
And that's on YouTube. Other platforms, you make nothing. Like on Instagram, I just kind of stopped posting reels. But when I was going hard on it, I would get some with millions of views like often, and I would make like $25 a month. So number one, doesn't make any money. And you could say, well, that's okay because it builds your following and then they'll watch your other stuff. But unfortunately, that's not true either. So viewers specifically on YouTube, but in general, viewers of short form content are a different audience than viewers of long form content. Meaning that the general rule of the internet is that people want more of the same. So if people are watching your short form content, that means they want more short form content. And you think about how people consume this, and it makes sense that they do not convert into viewers of long form content. The third problem is that it's very difficult to build brand in short form content, especially for someone who's likely to be listening to this, meaning that you're a thoughtful person that wants to build like a brand around the, nuanced things that you think. So I'll use a hypothetical example here of, let's pretend there's a girl on TikTok that, gets millions of views for cutting vegetables really fast, which I don't know if that's true, but it probably
is.
Yeah, probably. And let's say that, you went down the rabbit hole and watched a whole bunch of her videos last night, and then you saw your neighbor and you're like, oh my God, have you seen that onion chopping girl on TikTok? And your neighbor's like, yes, she's amazing. And you're like, what's her name? And they'll be like, I don't know. So can you get views from short form content? Yes. But if those views don't turn into money, and they don't turn into viewers of long form content, which is where you will make money, and they don't establish, brand in the same way as long form content does, what's it really worth? So I would say if you can create short form vertical video out of assets that you already have, and you can do that without spending a lot of time or money on it, like if you can just farm it out to, someone in the Philippines or something like that, go for it. But I would not optimize for it, and I would not put a lot of effort into it. Again, painting with broad strokes. I'm sure there's someone that's listening who's like, no.
Yeah.
I have an amazing business from TikTok. That's great, but I'm just painting with broad strokes.
Yeah. But I appreciate that perspective, because I think, I believe that we are in the same vintage. I'm a Gen Xer.
Sadly, I am. Yes.
I'm almost in my fifth decade. So
Yeah.
I've been there and seen a lot of the same things that you have. And it is funny to look back, and I've started trying to watch TikTok a little more, just to be able to talk to my students about it in a thoughtful way. And I'm like, what is this algorithm serving me? It's all crap. I'm like, where's the stuff that's supposed to be really good that people talk about? I'm not finding it.
Yeah.
And it's not keeping my interest, where it makes me more excited to go listen to something like a long form podcast or something that's going to be really intentional.
Yep. Yeah. Intentional is the right word, because think about how people consume short form video, because it's the same pattern on every app. You're just swipe. No, yes. If it doesn't grab me in 3 seconds, I swipe.
Right.
Which is fine. I'm not a boomer saying, that TikTok is bad or whatever. But my point is that from the perspective of someone who's trying to build a personal brand, is that the type of person that you want to be interacting with? Probably not.
Right.
Because the level of intent there is so low.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that you brought up earlier was that you've been able to leverage your audience and also monetize via Patreon and other formats. Yep. So I know that's something that's also push-pull. Like, people have said, oh, well, why don't you have buy me a coffee or a Patreon or something else for your podcast, and grow your audience in different ways and let them invest in you as much as you're investing. Mm-hmm. So will you talk a little bit about how those strategies came about, what you think's been effective or not, and what you recommend to people?
I mean, it really just depends. It completely depends. So with Patreon, you need either a very, very large or a very, very engaged audience, or what you're going to have is a Patreon with 12 members where you make $80 a month from it, and you're like, well, this is not worth it.
Right.
So, like, for perspective, I get a couple million views a month on YouTube, and I have, I think, around 400 patrons. If I put more effort into it, it's possible that could be larger. Mm-hmm. But I've sort of chosen to just say, like, it's going to be what it's going to be, and it's not going to be huge, but it's better than nothing.
Right.
On the other hand, I have a friend who is a guitar YouTuber who does put a lot of effort into his Patreon. He started a whole second channel specifically with educational content that feeds people to his Patreon. Where his strategy is, I'm going to give you this guitar lesson. If you want more, join my Patreon for the full thing.
Oh, nice.
And he makes probably 3 times more from Patreon than I do.
Wow.
But he also puts more into it. So any of these are viable options. You just need to be intentional about it and sort of understand that the idea of like passive income, I think, generally doesn't really exist. You're going to have to do some work. But it's the big thing
that everybody talks about, right? Like, create these passive income streams so you too can be a digital nomad, or you can have more time.
I mean, I've made a lot of money from so-called passive income. I would say passive-ish. You know, so for example, and I've sold lots and lots and lots of courses, you know, through these companies that I'm part of. I've probably sold $15 million of courses between, you know, these two companies. Now, that didn't all go into my pocket, to be clear, but I've been, you know, part of this machine. So I know a lot about courses. Creating courses is a lot of work to make it upfront. And very often someone makes a course because they think that it's what people want and then it doesn't sell. So you've taken on the risk of, you know, investing dozens or hundreds of hours into building this course only to find out that nobody wanted it. And if it does sell, that's awesome. But there's still an ongoing burden of, you know, answering support tickets and stuff like that. And, you know, you find out this video doesn't work anymore. What's going on with that? Oh, we need to redo that part, blah, blah, blah. Just, it's not like a huge deal, but there is like just sort of a nagging, ongoing, you know, amount of bullshit that's always going to be there. Still maybe worth doing, but the idea that you're just going to lay on the beach and forget about it and money comes in all the time, I don't think that world really exists.
Yeah.
At least I've never seen it.
Yeah. Well, then that leads me to another question about the courses. But are they typically, and I hate saying using high ticket, low ticket, right? But which do you think is better? Or do you think it just really depends on what you're offering?
Totally depends. I think that either of those, you know, it's basically a question of like high margin, low volume, or low margin and high volume. And both of those are potentially viable strategies. Just be intentional about it. What you don't want to do is be in the middle, I think, of something that's like kind of expensive, you know, like say, I hesitate to throw out an exact number, but something like $600 to me is like, well, that's more than I want. That's more than like whatever, $150 course that I would sort of buy without thinking about it too much. $600 is enough that I have to think about it. And it's starting to get at that point, I have kind of high expectations for it. Right. And whereas, or it's a $5,000 like one-on-one coaching thing where I'm going to have individual access to you and you're going to really hold my hand and give me white glove service. Like, okay, that's a lot of money, but like, I understand what I'm getting there. But if it's a $600 like video course, I'm like, that feels like it should be $150. So generally speaking, I like what they would call a barbell strategy of either, you know, go high or go low, but you don't want to be in the middle.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying hearing your perspective because you have had a lot of success in all of these different industries.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite client, customer, or if you don't want to name anybody specifically, type of brand or service that you love working with?
I like working with anybody who is smart and willing to put in the work and willing to be humble because, you know, like I said earlier, humility is like the necessary condition for success with personal branding because you always have to put the audience first. And it is going to be humbling many times when you you tried really hard to put this thing out and you got to sort of admit like, all right, turns out nobody cares about this.
Right.
And that's a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow, but you got to do it and move on. And so that's sort of the most important thing to me is just working with people with the right mindset.
Yeah. And then going to your audiences, since you mostly work on LinkedIn and YouTube, but I just followed you on Instagram. I know you have other socials. Do you find that different people are on the different platforms, or do you think
yes, they're all totally different. You know, Instagram and TikTok have a lot of overlap, but even then they're different. Yeah, the culture of every platform is different. The type of content that works well on one, you know, very likely won't work well on the other. I focus on YouTube and LinkedIn specifically because I think those are the two best platforms for people who want to build thought leadership brands, which is ultimately what I do. So that's the reason why I focus on those two. But there's people that have great businesses on every platform.
Yeah. And then what about differentiated content? Because people have to, you know, say, since there are different audiences on each platform, you should differentiate your content slightly, still be the same person, obviously the same brand. But then I also see people who put the same post on every single platform.
Yeah. So the answer to this question depends on how many resources you have. So like at Creative Live, I worked on the CEO's content team and he had, I think there were 4 of us. So, you know, 4 smart people who were good at their job, you can make a lot of shit that way. Yeah. So he could make differentiated, unique content that was native to each platform, which is obviously the ideal thing to do.
Right.
But you got to have 4 people making 6 figures each to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. Most people don't do that. Don't have that. So yes, if you have a team, for sure, but most of you don't. And so in that scenario, I would optimize for one platform, track one platform, and then go from there. I don't even think you need to cross-post stuff because it sounds like that's easy, and it kind of is, but in reality, it adds a lot of work, and it probably is not, to me, everything is about, like, I'm an operator at the end of the day. I'm not really a creative person. I'm like, my job is make the good line go up and make the bad line go down. And so to me, fundamentally, everything is about like marginal return on effort. And I think oftentimes the marginal return on effort of making that video clip and posting it on Twitter is close to zero, usually.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely there. And speaking of return on effort, now LinkedIn has collaborative articles. Sometimes you'll go on and it'll say, we want you to talk about this topic. And I'm like, but that's like something I used to do. It's not something I'm doing currently. Or I got an email today about a collaborative article. Like, we want you to respond to this. Do you think that is something worthy of people doing to add to their thought leadership if it fits their vertical, or does it really matter?
No, I have no idea what their strategy is for that. I'll tell you, and I did this. So if you answer enough of those and they're good answers that get upvoted or whatever, you'll get one of those like top voices badges.
Right.
Which I got with maybe 2 hours of work, if that. But so what? Like, you get this little orange badge next to your name that nobody really knows what it means and nobody cares about it. I don't know I have no clue what the purpose of those collaborative articles is. I think LinkedIn's like product leadership to me is like a blind 2-year-old, like finger painting is how they make their product roadmap. Like, you can't edit, for example, it's a minor thing, but like if you have a scheduled post, you can't edit it. You just have to delete it and start over. And yet they ship, have you seen these games that they rolled out a couple months ago?
Oh.
There's like these brain teaser games.
Oh, wow.
Like, literally nobody asked for this.
No, nobody wants to. I don't want to go to LinkedIn to play a game.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing over there.
Okay. I mean, maybe they're trying to make that a segue into LinkedIn Learning somehow. I don't know. Very odd.
What have they really done with LinkedIn Learning? So they bought lynda.com in whatever, 2016 maybe? What have they really done with it?
Yeah, not much.
Yeah.
Not much. What have we not talked about out of all of the exhaustive questions I've thrown at you that you really want to impart the audience with?
The thing I would leave everybody with is I believe that everybody has personal branding. Like, the idea of growing a personal brand is scary to a lot of people because you're putting yourself out there it has personal in the name. So it is a very personal thing. It feels scary, and I get that. But I really sincerely think everybody should be doing it because job security does not exist now. And like it or not, you are a row in a spreadsheet to any of these companies, even if it's your best friend's company. The just honest fact is that the moment any company feels like they're better off without you, you're gone. That's just the way it is. It's just business. It doesn't mean that they don't like you or whatever. They probably feel bad about it, but that's the way it is. And if you have not been building a personal brand, you're going to be in a much tougher situation than the people who have. And I don't mean to operate from a place of fear or negativity or anything like that, but that's just reality. And I'm always a fan of building the bridge before you need it, right? Because you get laid off by surprise and you're like, oh shit, I got to pick up the pieces. What do I do? Well, if you had a personal brand in place, still sucks to get laid off, but you're probably going to be in a better situation than someone who didn't.
Yeah, 100%. Finn, where are we sending people to if they want to learn more about working with you, get more wisdom?
Look me up on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to do it. Finn McKenty, FINNMCKENTY. Always happy to chat with anybody about anything, so don't be shy.
Perfect. And we will link that in the show notes. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, words that just have helped you like get through all these tumultuous times into the good parts?
Yes, I do. And it's going to be, do you know the philosopher Thomas Hobbes?
Yes.
The quote is, covenants without the sword are but words and of no strength to secure a man at all. It's from the Leviathan.
Nice. Awesome. Wow. That's, I would say, maybe a little deeper than the ones that people usually give me. So people have to think about that. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's listening or watching this episode of Your Brand Amplified. And I will be back again in a couple days with another amazing guest. In the meantime, leave us a rating review follow the show on LinkedIn and also on YouTube, because honestly, I'm now a little more motivated to start seeing what I can do for my YouTube to get the show numbers up. And
I'm happy to help if I can. Just let me know.
Thanks to everybody. And thank you, Finn. This has been a really wonderful conversation, and I've really appreciated you being here.
Same to you.
Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.